Hi, this is Ron Cipcic. In this particular video, we're going to take a look at how the market model can be used to look at the problem of scarcity. In a world of scarcity, we have limited resources and we have unlimited needs. And this presents a conflict or a problem. So these limited resources coming up against unlimited needs leads us to have to make what are called choices. So this is the problem of scarcity, and scarcity leads to the fact that we have to make choices. So in a world of scarcity, we're going to have to make choices. And really what economics is economics is the study of how people make choices in a world of scarcity. So let me just note that. Economics is the study of how we make choices in a world of scarcity. Now, what we want to do in this particular video is we want to use the market model to illustrate this. And there's a way to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this screen. And what we're going to write is basically the scarcity rule. Here's the scarcity rule. Scarcity rule. Something is scarce if, now if is a condition. We're not saying this is always true. We're saying that if this is true, something is scarce. So something is scarce if there would be a shortage of it at a price of 0. Now, if something is scarce, the price will not be 0. But the question is not, would markets actually operate at a price of 0? That's not the question. The question is, if the price were 0, would there be a shortage of it? And if that is true, then that product, good or service, or resource is scarce. So let's go ahead and illustrate this. Now I'm going to use my ruler tool to very quickly draw a supply and demand curve model. And we'll move it over here, and we're going to run a line here, and then we're going to rotate this, and we're going to run a line here, and we're going to rotate it again. I apologize for the time it's taking me to do this, but we want to get this diagram very nice, and we're going to rotate it here and move it over to here, and we'll see this happen. So I've got my supply and demand curve, and I'll go back to, I'll get rid of that. So here's my supply curve, here's my demand curve. Here's the equilibrium price. Here's the equilibrium price, PE. Here's the equilibrium quantity, QE. Now, here's the kicker. Here's the idea. In this market, the market is operating at a positive price. Okay? Given the interaction of supply and demand, the market's operating at a positive price. Let's say that this is speaking of bananas. I'm hungry, so I'm thinking food. So let's say we're talking about the banana market. Are these bananas scarce? And let's apply our rule. Let's suppose the price of bananas were 0. Now, we're not saying the price of bananas are 0. In fact, the price of bananas are above 0. But if the price of bananas were 0, what would be the quantity supplied? The quantity supplied would be 0. We can see that because it's not until you get to a price up here of X that you actually see companies willing to start supplying bananas. Okay, so at a price of 0, the quantity supplied would be 0. Nobody would produce bananas for profit if the price were 0. But if the price were 0, the quantity demanded would be way out here. Lots of people would want to eat bananas if the price were zero. So this huge gap right here is basically what? It's a shortage. So are bananas scarce? The answer is yes. Are they always scarce? The answer is yes. Because if the price were zero, if you applied this condition at any time, if the price were zero, there would be what? There would be a shortage. There would be a shortage. Now, can there be a surplus of something that is scarce? Yes, yes, look. Could the price of bananas be too high? Could there be a point where the price of bananas is too high? The answer is yes. So say the price of bananas is $5 a pound. That price is too high. How do I know it's too high? Because at that price, sellers want to produce QS blue, but buyers only want to buy QD blue. And you can see that at a price of 5, there is actually a surplus, the gap between QS and QD. So there can be a surplus of something that is scarce. Oh yes, there can be a surplus of something that is scarce. If the price is too high, $5 a pound, when maybe the going market price is only, say, $1 a pound, say the equilibrium price is $1 a pound, well, $5 a pound is going to create a fairly large surplus. Buyers will not want to buy as much. Sellers will want to sell a lot more at that price. That's going to create a surplus. So you shouldn't confuse the word scarcity with the word shortage. There can actually be a surplus of something that is scarce. Okay? And that's a very, very important idea. Very important idea. Okay? Now, let's take a look at a hypothetical problem where something is not actually scarce. I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curve here. So again, let me get my ruler out, and let's just, in a quick way, let's get our supply curve and demand curve drawn again. And we'll move this over here, and we'll make this our vertical axis, and we will rotate. And I'm learning how to use this new ruler tool, so I'm not as fast as I should be, but give me a few more videos and I am going to be smoking. And then we're going to raise the tool here, and we're going to put in a supply curve. So there's our supply curve, and then we'll go this way, we'll move our tool this way, and we'll put in a demand curve. So we'll put in a demand curve. And actually, I'm going to get rid of that supply curve because I don't need it. I'm going to actually do something kind of cute here. Say this is the demand curve for air. Demand curve for air. Is there a demand curve for air? Yes, and I would submit oxygen. I would submit it's way to the right. There's quite a large taste for air, if you think about it. But why is the air in this room, the air in the room I'm in a condo in downtown Grand Rapids, why is the air in this room not scarce? I'm not paying for every breath that I'm breathing. I'm not, every time I take a breath, I'm not paying 10 cents or a penny or whatever it might be. Why am I not paying for this air? Well, this air is not scarce. So let me show you something. This is kind of interesting. The supply curve for air is way over here. Whoop. The supply curve for air is way over here to the right. Now I'm going to give it a little bit of a positive slope. It doesn't have to have a positive slope, but we're going to give it a little bit of a positive slope. And I'm going to put it way out here. Whoop. Sorry, we're having technical difficulties. So there's my supply curve. So I'm going to put it way out here. Now we can get rid of that. So let me go ahead back to my labeling function. So this is my demand curve, and this is my supply curve. Now let's check out our rule. Here's P, here's Q, here's the quantity axis. Let's check out our rule. at a price of 0, there must be a shortage of the product if the product is what? If the product is scarce. However, at a price of 0, what do you got here? You have QD at this level, and you have QS at this level. Whoop. So this is QS, and what do you have here? You actually have a surplus of relatively clean air. Notice I've added the adjective clean air. You have relatively clean air, and there's a surplus of it at a price of 0, which means I don't have to pay for it. The price cannot get above 0. Why can the price not get above 0? Because there's a surplus at a price of 0. And there's no such thing as a negative price for air. So there could be products that where you have a tremendous demand for them. The oxygen in this room, I mean, if the oxygen in this room, or the oxygen in my city, or the oxygen in my country, or if the oxygen in the world were not clean enough to breathe, would I be willing to buy air tanks, oxygen tanks, and have those filled every day so I could breathe and live? And would I pay for that? Well, yes, of course, I would pay for that before I would pay for anything, before I would pay for food, before I would pay for housing, before I would pay for my car. Anything I might use, I would pay for oxygen before, because I can't live very long without oxygen. I can even go maybe a day or two without water, and maybe I could go weeks without food, but I can't go more than a couple minutes without oxygen. So the point is, the demand for this air is incredibly high, and probably the demand curve is very, very steep. In other words, if the price were very, very high, you might find ways to actually use less oxygen. For instance, you might get more fit. If you're more fit, you might be able to be more efficient with the oxygen you're breathing, and you may not have to breathe as much. That's an interesting scientific question. But the point is the demand curve lies inside the supply curve. They don't intersect. And because they don't intersect, you have a surplus. You have really a surplus of air at a price of 0. Very interesting question. So is everything scarce? Well, we can think of things like oxygen, the oxygen in this room, that is not scarce. Most things, however, in the world are scarce. And because they're scarce, you're going to have to pay for them. Now, if you qualify this and get into a certain level of cleanliness, you might actually, there are cities in the world that are very polluted. And for instance, Beijing, China, the capital of China. So if you want to breathe clean air in China, in Beijing, China, you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have some sort of breathing apparatus, or you're going to have to pay to get out of town. I've read articles where the quality of air in Beijing is the equivalent of, by breathing that air for a day, you're smoking the equivalent of 3 packs of cigarettes in terms of what you're getting. Now, I don't know if that's, exactly accurate, but that's what I've heard, that you're smoking the equivalent of several packs of cigarettes when you breathe that air without some sort of breathing apparatus. So to actually breathe clean air in Beijing, China, you would have to pay for it. So clean air is in fact scarce in many parts of the world, particularly certain urban areas. But in my condo here in downtown Grand Rapids, the air quality is quite high, and effectively I'm breathing relatively clean air for free. Okay, and that's what the model shows. Now I want to show you one more model. I want to talk about factors that affect the level of scarcity. So the condition for scarcity is there has to be a shortage at a price of 0. And there can be a surplus of things that are very valuable. Air is a great example of that. Air is a wonderful example of that. And there can be a surplus of things that are scarce, as I pointed out earlier with bananas. Let's talk about some factors that influence the level of scarcity. So again, I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to pull out my fancy smancy ruler here. I'm going to get things going. We're going to come over here. We're going to draw what is called a demand curve and a supply curve. We're going to draw a market. And so we're going to rotate this. And we're going to bring this down. And let's get that level. And we need to get this level. And I'm going to run a horizontal axis, and then we're going to run this up. So here's my supply curve. And then we're going to run this in a downward sloping fashion. Here's my demand curve. And there we go. So off that goes. We're going to clean this up a little bit. And here we are. Let's get that cleaned up. And there we go. We'll label it up. So here's P. Here's Q. Here's S. Here's D1, S1. Here's the equilibrium price. PE1. Here's the equilibrium quantity. QE1. Is this product scarce? Yes, it is. Why is this product scarce? Because if the price were zero, there would be what? There would be a shortage of it. Here would be QS. Here would be QD. There would be an enormous shortage of it at a price of zero. Now, what affects the level of scarcity? Well, there's two things that can increase the level of scarcity. You can increase the level of scarcity either by shifting the supply curve to the left or shifting the demand curve to the right. Why? Well, if you shift the demand curve to the right or you shift the supply curve to the left, you'll actually make this gap larger. Okay? Let's show the demand curve shift. So let me get my ruler out again. I'm going to push this demand curve out a little bit. Say that the demand curve moves to the right. Okay, I'm going to push it out to here. And I don't want that color, so let me get rid of that. Let's go to black. So I'm going to put another black demand curve in. So here's D2. And I'm going to clean this up. Bring this down. Extend this. There we go. And get rid of that. And this is D2. So let's say the demand curve has shifted to the right. Maybe there's been an increase in taste for this product. Maybe there's been an increase in income among the buyers who buy this product. And I'm assuming income is this product is a normal product, so greater income leads to greater demand. Maybe there's been an increase in the price of a substitute for this product. There's lots of factors that could shift the demand curve to the right. Perhaps there's an increase in the expected price of this product. Perhaps there's an increase in the population of people who are buying this product. Again, there could be lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of factors that could impact the demand for this product. These factors are called non-price factors. Non-price factors. Why? Because they shift the demand curve. Now, if that demand curve shifts to the right, what's that going to do? That's going to push up the equilibrium price, so the buyer is going to have to pay more, and it's going to what? It's going to push up the equilibrium quantity. So the equilibrium quantity is going to increase. But for our purposes, what we're interested in is what it will do to the shortage at a price of zero. So if we reevaluate this at a price of zero, QS would still be zero, but where would QD be? QD would be way out here. And what happens? The size of the shortage gets what? The size of the shortage gets bigger. The size of the shortage expands from QD orange to QD blue. So basically, by shifting the demand curve to the right, you increase the gap between QS and QD at a price of zero, and the problem of scarcity is more acute. More acute. So again, any factor that shifts the demand curve to the right or shifts the supply curve to the left will actually make this problem more acute. Understanding why the shift to the left would increase the gap, you have to understand that really this supply curve extends into the negative territory over here. So if you actually shifted the supply curve to the left, you would be actually pushing, in theory, you'd be pushing QS even further this way. So at a price of 0, you would actually have a negative quantity of supplied, which in real life makes no sense. But the fact is you push the supply curve to the left, you actually push the price up, which means you have to give up more to have the product. So again, either pushing the supply curve to the left or pushing the demand curve to the right is going to make the problem of scarcity more acute. So notice that I'm going to write something down here. Let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and erase this, and then I want to write a couple things about this. So I'm going to get rid of that. And notice that the let's say an increase in taste, a non-price factor, leads to an increase in what? Leads to an increase in demand. That increase in demand is going to lead to what? Greater scarcity. Greater scarcity. And that greater scarcity is going to lead to, let me just go ahead and erase that. Try that again. I think I can get that better. Apologize, my handwriting is sinking by the moment. That greater scarcity is going to lead to what? It's going to lead to a higher price. So when something becomes more scarce, you're going to have to pay more for it. So scarcity affects price. Price does not affect scarcity because price doesn't shift the curve. Non-price factors, this is a non-price factor. So it was a change in a non-price factor, which shifts the demand curve, affects the level of scarcity, and ultimately leads to the higher price. So scarcity, non-price factors affect scarcity, scarcity affects the price, but price does not affect the scarcity. If you had, for instance, an increase in cost, production cost, now I didn't show that in the earlier diagram, but if you have an increase in production cost, that will decrease supply. Well, anything that decreases supply is going to increase the level of scarcity. And anything that increases the level of scarcity is going to ultimately push the price higher. So the higher price, this is the key idea, the higher price is actually what? It's a signal, it's a sign that something has become more scarce. So if gasoline prices were to shoot up to $5 a gallon in America, God forbid, but if gasoline prices were to shoot up to $5 a gallon, gasoline prices are currently $2, $2.30. If gasoline prices were to shoot up over $5 a gallon, that would be a sign that gasoline for some reason has become more scarce, either because there's been an increase in demand for it or a decrease in the supply of it for some reason. Okay? So again, let me say this. Scarcity, let's write this out. Scarcity affects price, but price does not affect scarcity. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little video. It's just a quick look at how you can connect the problem of scarcity to the market model. And the market model actually can illustrate how the level of scarcity can change, either through shifts in the demand curve to the right or shifts in the supply curve to the left. And of course, the market model, the supply curve and demand curve model, can also show the fundamental condition of scarcity, which is that there is a price, at a price of 0, there's actually a shortage of the product. Okay? All right. I think we've gone on long enough. That will do it for this segment. Thank you.